Some people tell stories, some people live them, but anyone who can make reality a fantasy wins. Thank you for clicking on this video. I'm Brooke Makenna, but today we are talking about a woman named Agatha Christie. She was a writer turned author in the 1920s, but she was put in the Guinness Book of World Records for best-selling author of all time for her crime novels and also her mystery novels. But her life quickly went from writing these stories to living them, and she is supposedly said to be the original Gone Girl. And if you haven't read that book or watched that movie, it's basically about a girl who went missing. But did she really? And that's all I'm going to say about that. Let's get into Agatha's story because it is a very, very strange one, and it's still not really solved to this day. Please thumbs up this video if you like crime videos. It really lets me know what you guys like to see and it makes me feel a lot less alone for liking these creepy things. So please go ahead and do that if you do like it. Okay. Now back to the story. So her childhood was pretty average. She was born as Agatha Mary Clarissa Miller. She was born to Clara and Frederick Miller, and she had a pretty basic childhood. She was born on September 15th of 1890, and she was born into a pretty wealthy family who lived in a villa named Ashfield in Devon. She had two older siblings, Margaret and Monty, and the entire household was very open-minded as far as they were very aware of their mother's special abilities, you could say, and they all strongly believed that she was blessed with the gift of second sight, which basically meant that she was a psychic. Agatha's older siblings were allowed to go to public school. They learned just like everybody else, but Clara, her mother, did not let Agatha go to school. She actually insisted that she was homeschooled. And this kind of makes me think, was she possibly having visions of her daughter and what would happen to her or what she would become, and that's why she wanted to shelter her? Or did she think her daughter also had these psychic abilities? What made Agatha so different from her other two siblings? So she kept her at home and refused to let her read, saying that she did not need to read until she was 8 years old, even though she was very skilled and kind of a prodigy in reading and writing. At the age of 10, she had already written her first poem titled The Cowslip. There was once a little cowslip and a pretty flower too, but yet she cried and fretted all for a robe of blue. Now a merry little fairy who loved a trick to play just changed into a nightshade, that flower without delay. The silly little nightshade thought here life is a dream of bliss, yet she wondered why the butterfly came not to give his kiss. And you can already tell by that poem that she had a darker mind and kind of liked writing about the more negative things in life, and not everything is butterflies and rainbows. And so it's kind of cool to look back and see that that's how she started writing her crime and mystery novels. But a year after she wrote that poem, her life was about to get even darker, and not just in her writing, but in her real life. She has claimed that at 11 years old, everything just turned awful, and it basically marked the end of her childhood when her father died from a series of heart attacks. At this point, her mother Clara had to get a job, so she sent Agatha to school, where Agatha found regular schooling very, very difficult. She could not handle it, she acted out, she didn't do her homework, so eventually she was sent to boarding school in Paris. At 20 years old, Agatha went back to England after she had graduated from boarding school, and she found out that her mother Clara was unfortunately very ill. So she decided to go ahead and take her to Egypt for 3 months to kind of take her on a little vacation and spend time with her. They spent much of their time going to social functions and hanging out at tourist destinations for wealthy Britons, and really trying to find a man for Agatha, a husband. But with no luck, they came back to England, and that is when Agatha began to write her first creepy short story. The House of Beauty was a 6,000 word short story on madness and dreams, and it was supposedly said that she had had some sort of undisclosed illness during this time, which made her hallucinate, had very weird dreams, and that's where she came up with the concept of this story. She went on to write many more stories about things like this, about spiritualism, about paranormal activity. She really started finding her way in the writing community and where she fit in. But unfortunately, her work was still all being rejected. So she continued going to social functions looking for a man, because in this time, a man was supposed to basically support the wife. So around the same time as all of these rejections were happening, she went to a dance to get her mind off of it, and that is where she met Archibald Christie. Now, he was actually an army officer, so although they fell in love, they had to wait till Christmas of 1914 to actually get married when he was home on leave. While he was off in war, she actually decided to, along with her writing, go and volunteer at the local hospital to help the wounded soldiers. And she did that for 2 years, unpaid. And then the next 2, when Archie was actually back home, she became a dispenser of meds because she was qualified now. So she actually got paid for that as well. So it was now 1918. And this is when everything started for Agatha. She began writing her first full novel. And the main character was based on one of the wounded soldiers she had helped. And I'll write his name on the screen. This is actually the character's name and not the real soldier's name. I couldn't find it, but if you know it, please leave it down below. But this is where she started writing her novels. This was called The Mysterious Affair at Styles. And in 1920, it became her first published novel, and she was officially a published crime author. Not only that, but now she was also a mother to her child Rosalind Margaret Hicks Christie. Now her husband Archibald, or Archie, was now working in finance, and she was becoming, as the public called, a crime queen. It's like she had found her calling. She published 2 more crime novels, and she had many more rattling around in her head. And an interesting fact I found was that when she was writing these novels, it was all about mystery and trying to find who the murderer or the suspect was. And a lot of the times when she started, she had no idea who that was going to be. It was almost like a surprise to her as she wrote too, which is very interesting and makes her a brilliant author. And that is when Agatha and Archie were invited to go on the British Empire exhibition, which from what I could tell was basically a tour of sorts to help the economic problems and bring people in to Britain to help out with the trade and get people flowing in and traveling again, and also get people in their own hometown to start doing things again and really inviting other people over. Many buildings and stadiums were built in this time during this tour to really entice people to come over and see them. And Agatha was there because she was becoming such a big household name in England that they thought that she could possibly like promote it in a way, just kind of like how we have influencers on Instagram now who will go and promote different cities or different places. That's basically what Agatha was doing on this tour, and her husband was tagging along. So eventually they went back. Everything was working well with the British exhibition, and so they went back home. And unfortunately, in April of 1926, Agatha's mother Clara passed away. This was a huge blow for Agatha because her and her mother had always been super close. And at this time, her husband Archie was actually on a business trip, so he couldn't even be there for her. But she would later find out that he was the last person that she wanted to have comfort from. Once Archie came home, he figured this was a great time to come out and tell Agatha that he was in love with somebody else, and he was cheating on her. Not only that, but he was introduced to this woman from the director of the British Empire exhibition that they had went on together. Her name was Nancy Neal. Quickly, her life changed from a typical rom-com type environment to the most mysterious story of all time. So at this point, Agatha and Archie were still together for their daughter, Rosalind. Archie was still seeing Nancy and had no regret of it. So December 3rd of that same year, they had a really bad fight that morning, and Archie told her that he was going to spend some time with Nancy. he was going to get away from the house and spend some time with his mistress. And then he told his wife this. And that is when it said that Agatha had enough. Archie left the house that morning, but had no idea that Agatha was about to disappear. After Archie left that day, she left a note with her secretary saying she was going to Yorkshire, which was about 4 hours away. But then her car was found a little while later, 30 minutes in the opposite direction of where she said she was going to be going. It looked to be abandoned, and it still had the lights on and had an out-of-date license and clothes in the back. It was found near the edge of a pit that was a natural spring, and it was called the Silent Pool, and 2 children had drowned there. Once police got to the car, she was nowhere to be seen, and nobody had heard from her since that morning. And because Agatha was such a huge household name, this began a public outcry to find this woman, to find the crime queen. So they really pushed police, the public really pushed police to look into this, so they really had no choice, and she quickly went from novelist to just an average missing woman with a description. Age 35, 5'7", hair reddish, eyes gray, complexion fair, well built, and wearing a dark gray cardigan, small green velour hat, and wearing a platinum ring with 1 pearl, but no wedding ring. Well, who would want to wear their wedding ring when they're in that situation, but regardless. So actually the Home Secretary began pressuring police as well, and a newspaper in the area offered an £100 reward, which would basically be $135. And so the searches began, and it had close to 1,000 officers, 15,000 volunteers, and several airplanes searching this area and any area she could be. She was even put on the front page of the New York Times. But still 10 days later, she had not been found. And this is when people started to believe, or almost hope, that this was just kind of a hoax, a publicity stunt for a new crime novel she was coming out with. Because the other option at this point was that her husband did something unimaginable. But a day later, she was actually found, or more like recognized. A local musician named Bob Tappan actually recognized her from the pictures and called it into the police. When she was found, she was completely fine, physically. But they weren't sure about mentally. She was in Yorkshire, where she had said she'd be the entire time, specifically in a place called Harrogate at the Swan Hydropathic Hotel, which was basically a spa. So why hadn't they found her sooner? Why didn't they check the hotels for her name? What happened? Well, she had actually checked in under a different name and under the surname of her husband's mistress. So to the hotel, they knew her as Teresa Neal. Everyone at the hotel that the police talked to said that she seemed happy. She was playing cards, she was dancing around, she seemed perfectly content. Really the only thing they could say they thought was odd was that she was carrying a money belt, which is basically just like a small belt that you wear around your waist where you hold in the money when you don't want anyone to know it's there. But other than that, they couldn't really tell anything that was weird about her. So Archie came to confirm that it was her, and he said that it was, and said that it was probably just a loss of memory due to the crash. She has suffered from the most complete loss of memory, and I do not think she knows who she is. She does not know me, and she does not know where she is. I'm hoping that rest and quiet will restore her. I am hoping to take her to London tomorrow to see a doctor. And when he went to collect her, she actually made him wait in the lobby as she went and changed into her evening dress. But eventually Archie got her to London, where she went and saw a few doctors, which both said and confirmed that she had suffered with amnesia. Now some believe it was from the crash, but some believe it was from more of a depressive state, from her mother just dying, her husband leaving her, cheating on her, and that it was due to like a situation. But a lot of the public was actually very angry, because at this point it was odd. She wasn't saying she remembered anything. She didn't really, her memories were coming back, like she knew who she was, she knew who Archie was, but she couldn't understand what had happened in those 11 days. She had no idea. And so the public was getting very angry, saying that, okay, this was a publicity stunt, or maybe she wanted to frame her husband for murder, but people were getting really angry with her. But still, she kept to the story. She remembered nothing. But regardless of this, them being angry, like people often say, bad publicity is still publicity. And she became one of the most famous women in England. And it was almost like when her breakdown happened, when she snapped, she entered an alternate reality in which her fiction was the truth. And from that point on, that's how she lived it. And oddly enough, 2 years prior to this incident, she had written a book that had a character, a woman, who had faked her own amnesia. 2 years after this incident happened, they had enough of each other. Archie and Agatha finally divorced. Archie married Nancy Neal, and Agatha got to have full custody of their daughter. And she also kept the name Christie because her novels were doing so well, even better now, because like I said before, she was one of the most famous women. In total, she wrote 66 detective novels and 14 short stories, and shortly after this whole incident, she was completely herself again. And after her divorce, she wrote 6 romance novels, which was really strange for her, and she actually published them under a fake name, which was Mary Westmacott. And in one of these books, it's kind of said that that is when she finally told a little bit of what happened, but still nobody knows if that's true. So in one of these 6 romance novels called Unfinished Portrait, she had wrote about a messed up marriage and thoughts of suicide. It really, a lot of the story kind of went with what could have possibly happened, that maybe she went to commit suicide and couldn't do it and decided to go up to Yorkshire by herself. So Agatha's writing inspired many, many, many other authors, but so did her life. It has been found that in the novel turned movie Gone Girl, there are so many similarities to Agatha's life. So there's a woman that's loved by the public, the husband that took advantage of her trust and asked for divorce, the huge involvement and interest in the public after her disappearance, the husband being blamed. Then there was an easy reappearance with a money belt and no explanation ever given. It's basically just like the exact story, just a little bit more dramatized, which, I mean, a lot of fiction does come from the truth because the best fiction has a backstory or a backbone of a little bit of truth. And she actually wrote Murder on the Orient Express, which is a movie that just came out like this year. It was remade, but she had wrote the original book to that and many, many more. So towards the end of her life, it was supposed to be normal. That's all she wanted. She left the craziness to the pages of her books, and she remarried to a man named Max Mallowan, but her writing started to get her in trouble again. In 1941, the British Intelligence Agency began investigating her because she had named one of her main characters Major Bletchley. And that was the same name as a secret code-breaking facility in Bletchley Park. So they thought possibly she had some sort of spy inside this code-breaking facility, this top secret place, and they began to get very scared. But after some prying from a code breaker that began to become her friend, she had actually admitted that on a train to London, she actually had to stop there and she saw the sign for Bletchley, and she was so angered by the fact that this train was not getting where she wanted to go that she named one of her least favorite characters after this place, and it was pure coincidence. But on January 12th of 1976, Agatha Christie passed away. She was still married to her second husband, Max, at the time, and her daughter still believes this disappearance was brought on by pure shock and that she would love for it to stay raveled, which is actually quite doable because nobody still to this day has been able to figure anything out, even the people who look really deep into it. So it was rumored for a while that Agatha admitted to one of her husbands that it was all staged, but her grandson says that is not possible whatsoever. He says that she was not like that at all. She hated publicity and would do anything to keep herself out of it, so it would make no sense for her to randomly want all this publicity. But everyone knew that Agatha Christie loved a mystery, so I think she would be quite proud of her legacy and the mystery that she became, whether she created it or not. In 2017, an author named Andrew Wilson actually came forward with a new theory, and something that I kind of mentioned before, that possibly it was a suicide. But once she crashed her car and nothing happened to her, she was overcome with guilt because she was a Christian and suicide is technically a sin. So instead of admitting how distressed she was, how bad her mental state had gotten, she just decided to fake memory loss and go have some fun time and get away for a while. But doing that, she also stayed in plain sight where she knew she would eventually be found, so she didn't have to forever keep up this fake amnesia. And Andrew even pointed out that Agatha was a pro at misdirection in her novels and making us think one thing and see one thing when it was very, very simple, a thing that we just overlooked. And that's possibly what she did with this situation as well. She made it as simple as possible, and so everybody didn't think to look at the place where she said that she would be. So what do you believe happened in those 11 days when the queen of crime became a gone girl? But please thumbs up if you want more crime stories, and subscribe to let me know I'm not alone in liking these kind of weird, creepy things, because I'm really into it. So I love when I get comments and subscribers and likes, because it just makes me feel, first of all, like I have friends, but second of all, like you guys understand me in a way. And I know that this story did have a little bit to do with suicide, and I just want to let anyone out there watching know, if you are struggling with that right now, please, please, please just keep going, because there is so much light at the end of that tunnel. And I know right now it just seems like you only see the dark walls around you closing in, and it's so awful, but trust me, there is light. You just have to keep moving forward, and you're gonna have an amazing life. I know it. I believe in it, and I really hope that you can believe in it too, or you can at least believe me until you believe it for yourself. So I will let you guys go. Bye. Let the darkness of the world fuel the light in you. That way you always control the view.